in history. Minutes of history every day. The Magna Carta. Key points. King John ruled England at a difficult time. He faced wars with France, a shortage of money and clashes with powerful English barons. The barons became increasingly angry with John and eventually forced him to agree to changes in how England worked, written down in the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta is seen as the basis of many English laws and helped to influence the U.S. Constitution, which was written over 500 years later. Succeeding Richard I, John was crowned King of England in 1199. Richard I had died without any legitimate heirs, so John inherited the throne as Richard's only surviving brother. When Richard was king, he had spent a significant amount of time and money fighting wars against France and going on crusades. On his return from fighting in the Crusades, he was captured and held to ransom in what is now modern-day Germany by Henry VI, the Holy Roman Emperor. He was released once this was paid in 1194, which further affected England's finances. During Richard's time as a captive, John worked with King Philip II of France to try and seize the throne of England. This was unsuccessful, but Richard and John made peace with each other on Richard's return to England. During his reign, which lasted just under 10 years, Richard had spent only 6 months in England. Fighting in the Crusades had been expensive, and England was heavily in debt. King John's reign has often been criticized, but he had to manage clashes with the Pope, France, and his own barons. He had to deal with all these problems without the finances he needed to successfully manage them. John undoubtedly made some mistakes during his reign, but he did inherit several challenges on taking over from Richard I. The Magna Carta. In May 1215, a group of barons formed an army in the north of England and travelled south towards London. John had no choice but to offer them talks about changes to the way the country was ruled. He met with the barons at Runnymede, just outside London. King John and the barons came to an agreement that would take some power away from the king and mean he would have to work more with the barons. This agreement was the Magna Carta, which means Great Charter in Latin. It contained a total of 63 different clauses, setting out rules concerning land ownership, taxes, and people's legal rights. Some of the main points were: someone accused of a crime could not be imprisoned or punished without having a fair trial first. The king could not raise new taxes unless he had the agreement of the barons. A council of 25 barons was set up to ensure the king followed the rules the charter put in place. The consequences of the Magna Carta. Short term, the Magna Carta was designed as a peace agreement between King John and the barons. It failed to achieve this, and the two sides were at war with each other within 3 months of it being signed. Historians believe that both sides were unhappy with the 1215 agreement and probably had no intention of sticking to its terms. John died in 1216 and was succeeded by his son, Henry III, who was 9 years old. The Magna Carta was changed and amended, with a final version being agreed and signed with the barons in 1225. How do historians view King John? In the years following his rule, John was portrayed as being greedy and selfish. Matthew Paris was a 13th-century chronicler who was brutal in his criticism of John, saying of his death, "Hell itself is made fouler by the presence of John." Modern historians have re-evaluated John's rule. Some have praised him for his attempts to make reforms and suggested that he made the best of the problems he faced, arguing that he was in no position to fight a successful war in France. They have also argued that John was unfairly judged by chroniclers in the Middle Ages. Many of these chroniclers, including Matthew Paris, were also monks, and so they may have been biased against John because of the tensions between him and the Church. Many historians now believe that John had strengths and weaknesses as a king. It is their role to evaluate the evidence available to come up with their own interpretation of his reign.